So I'm going to take you through my safety inspection of my rental bike in Goa, India. Basically, what I'm going to do is start from the ground and work my way up. So the first thing, like any bike, is to check the tires. So I go to the back tire, I make sure that I had ample tread. The tire looked in great shape. I went to the front tire and checked the tread there. However, the tread on the front is already past the wear bar. I'm only using the bike for a week. It's not raining, so I'm not worried about it. If I was traveling farther, it'd be a bigger issue. As I move up, the brakes are the next thing that's important. On the front, down here, I can look down inside the brake rotor or the brake caliper. And inside the brake caliper, you can see the brake pads. And you can see it's got ample brake pad material on that. It looks pretty rough, but in reality, it's got plenty of brakes on it, so that's not an issue. However, when I test rode the bike, it had a pretty heavy pulse, especially during the end of the stop, which means it was a warped rotor. Again, if I had this for an extended period of time, that would be a concern. I'm only for a week here, so that's not a big deal. On the back, I'm not able to check the actual drum or inside the drum and the brake shoes themselves. So all I could do is take the bike for a test ride and make sure that the bike stopped, and it did just fine. For the chain looks pretty rough and nasty. You'll see there's red and dirt and fluff over everything, but when I rub off the link, the metal on the chain is in great shape, so it's not even rusted, and being that it's at the coast, that means it's a pretty new chain. If I tug on the back of the chain, it doesn't pull off the sprocket. When I inspected the chain, I also looked to make sure that it was lubricated, and in between, you can see that it's nice and wet in between the links themselves. I also checked the master link on this one to make sure that the master link was secure and it looked like in great shape. I checked slack on the chain down below, and there was plenty of slack there. Not too much, not too tight, so it was in good shape. Once I'm done with the drivetrain, I'm moving up to the motor. When I look at the motor, I'm looking just for any major leaks or anything that could be alarming. There was a fair bit of oil underneath in the motor, but not so much that it's actually dripping, so that's not a concern for me. And then up on top of the engine head here and at the base, there's some seeping and some areas that dust is collecting in the oil. Again, being an Enfield, they sort of breathe oil, so that's pretty normal. The exhaust is rusted, but not rusted through. It's not going to be a big deal. Looking at the carburetor, I checked the boots in front and back to make sure that they weren't cracked or leaking. The clamps are tight and there's no leaking on the rubber. Behind it, there's this plastic that's sitting right behind the carburetor. At first I was a little concerned, but then I could see it was stuffed in underneath the clamp just to be a buffer for the clamp. So it's really a non-functional issue. When I check suspension on this bike, the suspension is very antiquated. So basically I'm just looking to make sure that there wasn't oil spewing out of it. On the front, the same thing, that there was no oil leaking down the forks at all. The cable here goes into the clutch, so I did pull back the rubber and just make sure that the cable wasn't frayed. Anytime you do a rental bike, I always check the mileage before I start. This one had a nice 30,000 kilometers. However, there's absolutely no speedometer cable on the bike, which again, in India, not a big problem. In fact, when I rented the bike, every time I asked about something on the bike, all the guy did was show me that the horn worked. So I know the horn works. I checked the headlight, I checked the turn signals, and I checked the brake light and tail light. This bike has neither a brake light or a tail light. It's not very uncommon here to have bikes without, so I made an agreement he would come and fix the bike. We never got around to it, but I don't ride after dark, so it really wasn't a big deal. Other than that, I made sure that the free play and the brakes worked, the clutch, the brake, the throttle, everything worked properly. It's a pretty rough looking bike, but the maintenance on it's better than it appears to be. One last thing was just doing a test ride, make sure the bike was stable on the road, that it didn't wobble around. I couldn't check tire pressure because I didn't have a gauge, but I did look to make sure that it did not sit too low on the rim, and when I rode the bike that it felt stable, and that's the best I could do at this point. So there you go. That's a motorcycle inspection for a rental bike, Goa, India.